The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
Returning from the region of Tyre, Jesus went by way of Sidon towards the Sea of Galilee, in the region of the Decapolis. They brought to him a man who was deaf and who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. Jesus took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and put his fingers into his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, "Ephphatha," that is, "be opened." And immediately the man's ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. Then Jesus ordered them to tell no one, but the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. They were astounded beyond measure, saying, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." The Gospel of the Lord. Well, it's good to be with you here again at the east end of our family of parishes. During the week we cover a lot of territory, all the way from St. Jerome and then St. Anne and then Good Shepherd and here. And I've tried to get at least one weekday Mass a week here so that I can be a part of the community and also to, as Angela does such a wonderful job of rotating all of the priests and deacons and everything, to try and get here at least 1 or 2 weekends a month. And as I was driving out here on this beautiful, beautiful morning, I realized, this ordinary time really isn't anything ordinary. It really should be a time of growth for you and I. And even our green liturgical colors that we wear during the season, the reason the church uses green is because this is, as you know, many of you know, this is a time or a season of growth, of things growing and flourishing and things coming to fruition. And the whole idea of this season of ordinary time is about discipleship. It's about growth. And so that we wear these on the outside so that you and I are reminded that our interior growth comes from the inside out. And all of this healing that Jesus was doing was always intended to work from the inside out. Even though there's exterior or physical manifestations of illness in our life, in our world, in our humanity, Jesus always went from the inside out to heal. And that all the people that Jesus healed, all these parables are always about this renewal when Christ comes into our life. And today we have this powerful, powerful story about Jesus meeting the deaf mute. And it's the word Ephphatha that I want to focus on today, which literally is Aramaic, and it means be opened. To open, to be opened. It's a powerful word for you and I. I am a Maronite Catholic priest. In our Maronite Catholic liturgy, if you've ever been to one, we use Aramaic in our liturgy quite a bit. Our consecration, our Eucharistic prayer is partly done in Aramaic. Our approach to the altar at the beginning of Mass, our approach to the altar for the Eucharistic prayer, it's Aramaic. Aramaic, Syriac are the language that Jesus spoke. And it's interesting that Mark, only 3 times do we hear Aramaic in all the Gospels. Hear it in Ephphatha, we hear it in Lama, Lama Sabachthani, the little girl who was ill and Jesus raised her from the dead. And we hear Jesus say it from the cross, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? Those are the only 3 times we have Aramaic in our Gospels. We have to pay attention to that. Be opened. Now, many of you don't know my background. Some of you do, a little more than others. But when I grew up in Detroit, graduated from University of Detroit, had a corporate career starting, had a mentor friend of mine who encouraged me to get involved with Little Caesars Corporation. Now, this is 1988 now. It's going back a few years. So I left Michigan, and I moved to Maryland in 1988, and we formed a company, and we started opening up Little Caesar restaurants in Maryland. I didn't know anyone in Maryland. I left Maryland, had to form a company, hire people, work with complete strangers. A few weeks before we're opening our first restaurant, June 6, 1988, I remember that date very well, a gentleman walks into the restaurant, and he says, "Hi." I said, "Hi, how are you?" He says, "My name is Raleigh Shelton." I go, "Hey, Raleigh Shelton." He says, "You're from Michigan." I said, "I am." He goes, "I am too. Nice to meet you." He says, "Well, you're opening up," this is Frederick, Maryland, by the way, Central Maryland, Frederick County, Maryland. He says, "You're opening up here. I'm going to open up a few months after you in Hagerstown, Maryland, about 40 minutes west of Frederick." I said, "Wonderful, great to meet you." He said, "If you need anything, I'm always here to help you." Exchanged phone numbers. That was way before cell phones. And he went on his way. He was a tremendous help to me opening our first restaurant. And we became good friends. Raleigh was about 13 years older than me. He started with Little Caesars when he was 16 years old, when they had one restaurant as a doorman. Raleigh and I got to know each other after I was married. My wife moved from Sudbury to Maryland. Raleigh and Diane and us, we did all kinds of things together. We traveled together. We went to conventions together. He was a wonderful friend. When I sold out my interest and I moved back here in 1996, Raleigh stayed in Maryland and worked for about another 8 years, moved back to Michigan, to Big Rapids. He has a house on a lake there. We stayed in touch all these years. About 7 years ago, I get a call from his son, Chad. His son said, "John, I don't know how to tell you this." He said, "But I got some bad news about my dad." I said, "What happened?" So I just talked to his dad probably 3 months before that. He said, "My dad had a numbness in his arm. You know, when at Little Caesars, every day we used to roll all the dough balls by hand. We didn't use frozen dough. And in my day, I probably rolled 1,000,000 dough balls." Well, Raleigh had been doing this since he was 16. He developed kind of like carpal tunnel, but it was related to something in his neck, and he was going in for a simple surgery, 70 years old. Never been sick a day in his life. I mean that, not even to the doctor. So I said, "What happened?" That his dad went in for the surgery, supposed to go home that day. During the surgery, something happened. They nicked a nerve, and he's paralyzed from the neck down. Wow. I said, "Well, what can I do?" He said, "I'm just letting you know." I said, "Well, I'd like to talk to your dad." He said, "He's not up to talking to anyone yet, but he'll call you when he is." A few weeks later, Raleigh calls me from the bed in the hospital. We started talking. I was a deacon, of course, at that time. And Raleigh was never, all the time we spent together, I really didn't know him to be a man of faith. He's a wonderful person, honest as the day is long, hardworking, do anything for anyone, but we never really talked about religion. He knew I was a deacon. I said, "Raleigh, what can I do for you?" He said, "John, I'm open to anything. I am open to anything. I've lost everything. I'm open." I said, "Well, we'll pray for you, Raleigh." And we've been praying for Raleigh and his wife, Diane, ever since. 2 weeks ago, unfortunately, his primary caregiver, his wife, Diane, passed away. I'm going to see them at the end of the month. My wife and I are going to make a trip up north to see them, see Raleigh. The point of this story is Raleigh, who had no faith whatsoever, as long as he might have had a faith, but not an exterior faith, was open to healing. He was open to prayer. He was open to having Christ come into his life. And I think for you and I, often, we get kind of in a place where we stop believing in the power of Christ in our life. That there might be situations where we kind of close up a little bit. Maybe what's going on around us has made us a little jagged, made us a little doubtful, made us a little unbelieving. That Christ wants to plug into our life right where we're at, and as he did in the gospel today, to literally open our ears and our mouths so that in his own way working through us, we can live again. The amazing thing about Raleigh is he never, ever gave up hope, and he still hasn't. I just talked to him 2 days ago. Just lost his wife to cancer after a 2-year struggle, in a bed for 7 years, still open to the possibility of Christ working in his life. And I don't doubt for a second that Jesus Christ will work in Raleigh's life, maybe in not exactly the way Raleigh wants, but in God's own way to bring something greater out of his suffering. And I've already seen that, by the way. His family has come together. His children have moved closer, his 2 boys. They're looking after him. They're taking care of him. And their faith is powerful. They were open to the strength they needed to help their father and mother at their greatest time. Be open. I'd like us today to pray together. I want to make this our prayer today. To pray for the Lord to touch each of us, to open what's closed up inside of us. I invite you to join me in just such a prayer. I ask you to just close your eyes for a minute. I'll read off these prayers. And just open yourselves up to Christ working into your life, to plugging into your life today, this moment, wherever you're at. Let's be open. Open me to your word, Lord, when I am too busy to listen for the sound of your voice. Open me to live with loss when I think I have nothing left to live for. Open my soul to be patient with others, as patient as you are with me. Open me to doing your will when my own seems so much easier. Open my heart and soften it when it is hardened by grudging resentments. Open my wallet to serve those in need, as well as I care for myself and my own. Open my spirit to the simplest of joys with my family and friends as with you. Open my imagination to thoughts, good and pure, and weed out what doesn't belong. Open my arms to those I've spurned, and help me forgive those who have hurt me. Open my eyes to see as you see, with compassion and understanding. Open up, Lord, anything within me that's closed to my neighbor's needs. Open up, Lord, anything within me that's closed to your mercy and love. Open up, Lord, anything within me that's closed to what you desire for me. I count 13 ephathas, 13 prayers, 13 openings in this prayer. They might not be as dramatic as Jesus' healing of the deaf-mute, or today, for you and I, opening ourselves up to the Lord, they might be even more so. Each of those 13 openings are there for all of us. All of us are in need of some of them. Some of us may be in need of all of them. For some of us, even one or two of these might be a minor miracle. These openings are there for all of us who seek them from the Lord and do what we can to open ourselves to his touch and his grace. The greatest opening of all is what's offered for us in the living Word of God and in the bread and cup of the Eucharist, where in the breaking of the bread and the sharing of this cup, the Lord opens himself up to us in the sacrament of his presence, as he opened himself to us on the altar of the cross. Ephatha, be open. Open us, Lord, all of us, right now, today, to what you share with us here in your word and at your table. Amen.